At quarterback, the Broncos have one of the most divisive prospects of the draft in Bo Nix. I had him as the 31st best player in this class, and he went 12th overall. Since 2019, rookie first round quarterbacks average a nice 69 PFF grade, which would be good for 26th best in the league this year. Nix might be on pace for a better than average rookie year, though, as he is an experienced rookie that enters the year 24 years old. So he's kind of ancient, and that's going to help him probably hit the ground running. At backup quarterback, Zach Wilson is a low end option. He was 30th of 35 quarterbacks, according to my metric that looks at performance compared to team help based on PFF, pass blocking, and receiving grades. So even with his team not being good around him, he also wasn't performing at a high level. He really struggled in basically every metric you could look at, be it quarterback rating, expected points added, even just yards per game. So advanced and simple stats he struggled in. So the Broncos need Bo Nix to stay healthy, and they also need him to play at a decent level if they want to stand any chance this year. I don't have the highest hopes for that, as evident by them ranking where they do. But there is the chance that Bo Nix is a solid quarterback, and Sean Payton could get the most out of him because he is regarded as being a guru of sorts. But I think it's pretty clear that Zach Wilson is not going to be their guy. So again, they need Nix to stay healthy. The O-line for Denver will be doing a good job of making sure Nix stays healthy, as the line is extremely good. They were 8th in pass block win rate and 3rd in run block win rate by ESPN stats. Compared to last year, they should be pretty similar, but likely a little bit worse, as they returned 4 or 5 starters, with center Lloyd Cushenberry being the only player to not return. Luke Wattenberg replaces him, and that's a bit worrisome, as Luke was a 5th rounder with basically no experience in the past 2 years. Their depth is also less than ideal, as Calvin Throckmorton is their only notable backup, as he is a solid interior option, but that's it. They'll need their starters to stay healthy, and then they should be fine. So again, they don't really have much depth, but there's a lot of teams that don't have offensive line depth, so they're not alone in that, but that is something that is going to be a little bit worrisome for them. Regarding their weapons, they're not very good. Courtland Sutton is their lead guy, and he was 51st in yards per game and 37th in yards per reception. So he's a solid player. I think ideally would be a number 2, but I think he's pretty clearly their number 1. He has some proficiency in winning deep downfield, as evident by being 37th in yards per reception. That shows that he can win in the most important part of the field, but he's not a super high-end receiving option just because he doesn't really wow you with any singular trait. He is tall and he's a bit physical, but that's about it. There's nothing that extremely nicely stands out for him. Next is Josh Reynolds, who was 80th in yards per game and 18th in yards per reception. So he really does win downfield. He is going to really be their deep threat, and he is rather proficient in that. He's not the most reliable in the short game. That's not because he had some important drops in the playoff game against the 49ers. That was kind of not really what he usually looks like, but he is more of a deep downfield winner than he is a consistent catcher. So he has a nice skill set that plays off of Sutton's, where they both can win deep downfield to some degree, but Reynolds is playing at a much higher level in that regard. Sutton is going to win with physicality. Reynolds is going to win with physicality also to some degree, but also with a good proficiency to change speeds. Third is Marvin Mims, who's 125th in yards per game and 5th in yards per reception, which is a ridiculous discrepancy of stats. He definitely can win deep downfield also, so that's another guy that can do some things deep downfield. He is the best of the bunch in that regard, but he was doing it on such a small sample size that it's hard to really put a ton of faith in him. I have more faith in Reynolds, even though he was 13 spots lower in yards per reception, just because Reynolds was doing so on a higher volume. Who knows, though? Mims might be that guy, and he might be their true deep downfield winner. So they do have some options at receiver. It's just nobody you feel ultra safe with beyond Sutton. Lastly, for their receivers is Adam Troutman, who finished 50th in yards per game among tight ends and 25th in yards per reception among tight ends. So he's not really much of anything. That 50th out of 64 starting tight ends, or not starting, but tight ends that get any sort of activity, is pretty darn rough. Moving to their running backs, though, Javonte Williams had a disappointing year last year, but he is very talented. Nonetheless, he was 51 out of 59 halfbacks in PFF grade. Depth-wise, Brandon Johnson and Lil Jordan Humphrey are solid wide receiver backups. Troy Franklin should also be a good high upside player in the receiving room as well. They also have Tim Patrick, who has been unfortunately injured for several years at this point, but he could potentially be something. Samaje Perine is a very good backup running back. Greg Dulcich is a promising depth tight end as well. So they have pretty good talent beyond their starters, which is the first position that is true for. They have not the highest end of receiving talent, but they have a consistent wave of guys that can contribute, which is nice. At cornerback, the Broncos should be really tough, but it'll be contingent on their outside cornerback too to determine just how good they are. Patrick Surtain ranked 42nd out of 127 corners in PFF grade. The year prior, though, he was second out of 118, so he has insane upside. At his best, he is right there with Sauce Gardner for being the best corner in football, which is really impressive. Sauce is on a historic pace to start his career, but again, Surtain is right there with him when they're at their best. Moreover, though, Surtain is also really strong against the run, which is a nice benefit. It's obviously not something that is too super important for a corner, but obviously you would like your corners to be good against the run as opposed to them struggling, as a lot of corners do. Their cornerback, too, is likely Levi Wallace, who was graded 88th out of 127 corners by PFF. But he was in a system that didn't really play to his strengths in Pittsburgh, as he played more man than he should have. He was a solid contributor in Buffalo. He was, in fact, a starter for a good deal of time. I forget how many years exactly, but he contributed for quite some time in Buffalo in a more zone-heavy scheme. And I think with Denver, if they play to his strengths, he should be a solid contributor again. At their nickel, Jaquan McMillan was ranked 47th out of 127. He is fantastic against the run and is solid in coverage too. He plays well above his 5'9" height, but that is actually kind of a benefit at nickel because it helps with the shifty route runners that you run into in the slot a lot of the time. So being 5'9" is not really an issue at that position. It can kind of be an issue at outside receiver or outside corner, where receivers are oftentimes going to be at least 6 foot and they can be a little bit more physical deep downfield against you. But McMillan doesn't really struggle with that in the slot. He is very solid as a player. At safety, they are pretty good. Brandon Jones was 16 out of 95 safeties in PFF grade. He's solid against the run, but very good in coverage, so that's where he really stands out as far as his strengths go. PJ Locke was 60th of 95 safeties, according to PFF. He plays deep safety a good deal, but he is at his best against the run, so they play nicely off each other, Jones and Locke. It's nice that they have a balanced safety duo. Regarding their DB depth, Damari Mathis had an awful year, ranking 126th of 127th, so second to last this past year. But before that, he was 51st of 118. So he has potential. It's just really going to be a question of what Mathis do we get this year. He is the guy that could compete for their cornerback 2 position. At his best, he's better than Levi Wallace, but at his worst, there's no conversation. So it's really hard to say who's going to start. I think training camp will go a long way in determining that. But either way, they have some potential at defensive back. They have Surtain, obviously, and then they have some guys that can contribute. So again, the team's not looking that rough at an important position. On the D-line, the Broncos are pretty well set, which is kind of surprising that they have as much going for them as they do. Jonathan Cooper finished 27th out of 122 in edge pressures. He's also a solid run defender, so there's no deficiencies in his game. Baron Browning was great when he got reps, being ranked 61st out of 122 in edge pressures, despite only playing in 10 games. So if he played the full season, he would have been much higher on this list, which is kind of a darn shame because he really does have a ton of potential to him, and he just wasn't able to show it because he wasn't getting enough reps. In addition to having serious potential as a pass rusher too, he's also great against the run, using his awesome athleticism to shoot gaps at a high rate. Zach Allen is a very underrated player, as he was 8th out of 142 in defensive interior pressures. He's a very good run defender to boot, so he is super solid all around. That's kind of a theme with a lot of their key contributors, is on the defensive line, that is. They are balanced players, and that is super nice because you obviously want to stop the pass in the modern game, but you're not going to be able to get solid pass rushing opportunities if you're continually getting blown up in the early downs as far as running is concerned. So it's nice to have that balance of being solid in both regards. Speaking of being underrated, though, like Zach Allen, John Franklin Myers is a very steady defensive lineman, too. He was 34th out of 142 for edge pressures. With that said, though, he will likely be an interior player for Denver. He is reliable as a run defender and has great versatility as an inside-out type of player. On the initial downs, he's probably going to be an edge rusher and be a little bit oversized for that, which is not a bad thing. If you have the requisite athleticism to play on the edge and you're big-bodied, more power to you. But it's ideal because on passing downs, he's going to be able to play on the inside and really set his ears back and be a great pass rusher. So he is super talented and he's versatile as well. They got him for like a 5th or 6th round pick, I want to say, as well. They got him for basically nothing from the Jets because the Jets were kind of up against it salary cap wise. That was a good move for Denver. They got a very talented player for basically nothing. As far as their depth goes on the defensive line, Nick Bodino ranked 41st out of 142 for edge pressures, and he missed 2 games, so he could have been even higher on the list. Additionally, Malcolm Roach is a fantastic run defender on the interior, and DJ Jones is an alright nose tackle. Jonah Ellis is someone with potential as well, as he was drafted in the 3rd round this year. Since 2019, 3rd round edge rushers average a solid 60 PFF grade, so he will likely be a solid contributor. For context, a 60 PFF grade at edge would be good for 89th out of 122 edge rushers. So it's not going to blow you away, but that is, again, solid for a guy that might be a rotational player. So that's not bad. They do have some higher end depth pieces, but if he's somebody they fall back on as well, that's not the end of the world by any stretch. As far as linebackers go, the linebacker core isn't a strength. Alex Singleton ranked 57th out of 82 linebackers in PFF grade. He is great against the run and can pass rush as well, but he really struggled in coverage this past year, ranking 72nd out of 77 linebackers in PFF coverage grade. So he has some pretty glaring deficiencies, but what he's good at, he's good at. So if he can play with somebody that plays off of him, he's going to be less of an issue. Sadly, though, Cody Barton is not really that. He doesn't incite inspiration, as he was 74th out of 82 linebackers in PFF grade. He is sort of the inverse of Singleton, as he's good in coverage but poor in the other facets of the game. But I think it's going to be more of an issue than it is a nice playing off of each other, because they just really, really struggle at the things they're not good at, as evident by Barton being 74th out of 82. So I think that they're going to be targeted in different aspects, with Singleton being targeted in coverage and Barton being targeted in the run game. I think that's going to be an issue more so than it is going to be a nice playing off of each other. The depth at linebacker for Denver is a big question mark, as Drew Sanders didn't really play last year, and when he did, he wasn't successful. Moreover, Jonas Griffith hasn't played since 2022, so it's a big question mark on what the depth at linebacker will look like. You're mainly playing two linebackers, with nickel being the new base defense, but it is nice to be able to go three deep when teams are running the ball more or if somebody gets hurt. So Sanders is going to be a moderately big deal for them, because he is going to be playing, or at least being asked to play, in rundowns. And again, if somebody gets hurt or if Barton just isn't playing up to snuff, Singleton also, if he's really getting targeted in coverage, maybe Sanders can do better. It's kind of a question mark at linebacker for them, and it's not a great look. In all, the Broncos are a bit all over the place, as you could imagine would be the case with Sean Payton coming in and changing the roster a good deal. Bo Nix is a low upside, high floor quarterback, and I think he can have success with Payton drawing up open reads for him. His receiving options aren't awful, but going into the year, it's hard to feel confident in them, too. Defensively, their defensive backs could be very good, but the corner opposite Surtain is going to have to produce for them to reach their full potential. I think their defensive line is low-key a strength for them, as they have a good amount of talent that doesn't get talked about. To wrap it all up, though, their linebackers aren't very good, but they balance each other out a little bit as far as their weaknesses go, with their strengths being opposite of each other. With that said, though, they do have glaring issues that can be targeted, so I think that's going to be a problem for them. Those are my thoughts on the Broncos. Be sure to let me know what yours are in the comment section below, and also be sure to like and subscribe for more NFL content.